This is called Holding Space for Yourself, the Ethical Obligation of Self-Care. Now, why are we talking about ethics with self-care? I hope by the end, that's a question that you'll be able to answer. And for some of you, it might be really obvious, but for others, maybe not. And it certainly isn't for a lot of people, I'll tell you that much. So first of all, congratulations for being here today. That's fabulous. It's great that you're here. A lot of folks don't come to these kind of events, and I'd love for you to ponder just for a moment why that might be. Why don't people join these kind of events? And we'll try to answer that question. But as we're going through this, see if you can kind of come to your own conclusion, and maybe you already know. So yay for you for being here, for starters. You're taking care of yourself. I actually have thought about maybe we should call this holding space for yourself, the ethical obligation of going to trainings, because therapists love trainings. And so maybe if I called this a training, or other people who talk about this or write about this called it a training, maybe more people would be willing to attend. So yay for you for being here. We are going to talk about today the ethical obligation. What does that mean? How does this show up in the ethics codes? Because the ethics codes, none of them talk about self-care directly. So we're going to talk about how does that show up? We're going to talk about what does it mean to hold space for yourself? We hold space for clients, right? That's the therapy hour, the relationship. We hold space for them. And we're statistically super lousy at doing this for ourselves, really lousy, like upwards in one study, it was upwards of 67% of therapists who were polled had at least one significant incident of burnout in their career based on just the demands and not having adequate self-care. So that's a big number. I mean, 67% of anything statistically is like, a mushroom cloud. So just for perspective. So we're going to talk about what gets in the way. Why aren't we better at this, right? We tell people about this stuff all the time. How many times in your day are you talking to people about taking care of themselves, right? That's the thing that we're talking about as well. We're really good at knowing this, but some serious pieces of who we are and our field, how we're trained, get in the way of us really realizing how important it is for ourselves. And of course, what does ethics have to do with it? So that's what we're going to cover today. So my invitation for you is to bring your humanity today. Just sit here for the hour and be a human. You don't have to necessarily take copious notes. It's not going to be that kind of thing on purpose, where you can just bring your human self to this conversation today so that you can be thinking about it, feeling about it in that way. Because that's really what this is about. And we can forget as therapists about our own humanity. So that's what we're going to cover today. So if you have read much, I don't know if you've read much in the arena of self-care, but the discussions about what it's like to be a therapist, I'm just going to read one line to you. This was out of a study that was done about during COVID-19 about how therapists can diminish burnout symptoms through self-care. The authors are Amy Rokosh and Samir Bulzareg. And they say, we covered the demanding nature of psychotherapy and its grinding trajectory. Oh my gosh. The loneliness, the isolation felt by clinicians in private practice, the professional hazards faced by those caring for others, and the creative and insightful ways that mental health practitioners can care for themselves. That line of the grinding trajectory, and it really is, whether we want to believe it or not, being a psychotherapist, there can be a grinding trajectory, and often there is. I remember when I was I was a pretty new therapist. So this was, I don't know, sometime in the 80s. It's been a little while. And I had a neighbor who was a clinical social worker, and I was in school and, all bright-eyed and excited about the path that I was going to be on. And she and her partner both had these horrible autoimmune diseases and just were like kind of curmudgeons. And I thought, wow, what happened to them? And they just talked about what it was like to have been a therapist for many, many decades. So I really took that in, and I've known I was fortunate enough to have the experience of being in a situation with other therapists I was in a consultation group for many, many years where these women would talk about what it was like for them and what was happening to them physically. And I was the youngest one in the bunch. They're all now in their late 70s, early 80s. And I was the kiddo at that point. And they would talk about these illnesses that they had. And the literature is really chocked full of evidence suggesting that, guess what? Being a therapist is really hard on our nervous systems. It's hard on our relationships. It's hard on our bodies. So that's the not so good news. But there is this elixir that is available to us, but because of who we are and what we're taught and our values as therapists and the tendency to be giving people, we don't tend to apply that necessarily to ourselves. So we're going to talk today about what we need to be doing to make sure that that happened. I can tell you myself in a little quick story that I have had two significant events of burnout earlier in my career. One, oh gosh, I can't even remember when it happened, but it was early on. And I was just exhausted. And emotional exhaustion is the number one symptom. We are just exhausted all the time, irritable, losing compassion, losing empathy, which unfortunately makes us not great therapists. We're not able to be there for people in the way that we want to be there by trying to be there for the people that we want to be there for. So for any of you who have had this experience, you know what I'm talking about. It is awful. Trying to drag to work, not really caring what people have to say, dreading the thought of going into the office or turning on your computer. I mean, it's really, really lousy. That's at kind of an extreme extent. So I've got some big things going on in my life right now. What has become imminently clear to me is that if I don't really work actively, regularly on taking care of myself, I'm going to be a disaster and I'm not going to be able to be there for anyone. So sounds good. We all know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. We're going to try to dig in a little bit into what gets in the way. But first, let's talk about holding space for yourself. What does that even mean? Again, you think about holding space for your clients. What does it mean to hold space for your clients? It means that you are providing a space where there's no judgment. It's a space where they can just be themselves. There is just permission to strip everything away that they hold in terms of the messages in their heads and the things that get them worked up inside about who they are. And we're trying to help them have space where they can strip all of that away. And we provide that for them. That's what I'm inviting you to do for yourself, to hold it with the same reverence for yourself that you do for your clients. It is tough. I mean, I can't tell you, for those of you who work with us, perhaps you've seen this before. I can't tell you how many times we have had, I've walked into our kitchen. We have a kitchen area in our Park Ridge office space. And I would see somebody standing up, leaning against the sink, shoving some lunch meat or, spooning some food or soup or something really quickly into their mouths, try to get their lunch in so that, because they have a 10-minute break so they can go back to work. I've done that. I've done that many, many, many times. I don't do that anymore. I actually schedule a whole meal break, an hour. I schedule a whole hour in my day. But time is care for other people. Time is money. So there's a lot of reasons that we end up not taking care of ourselves in just even that simple little way. So the invitation is to have a practice of holding space for yourself, making that be a part of your regular daily hygiene. I think of it as hygiene. Would I go out of the house without brushing my teeth? No, not if I could help it, unless the house was on fire, I think. I wouldn't do that. Would I go out without being clean or putting on clean clothes? No. So I think of this as the same kind of thing. It is emotional hygiene. And it's really important that I pay attention to it. And once I had that as my framework, I now have a commitment to it in a way that I just never did before. So now it actually happens. Yay. So that is holding space for yourself. That's the invitation. So take a moment. How do you, or how would you like to hold space for yourself? Take a moment and just reflect on that. How do you, or how would you like to? Might be you stop between sessions sometimes and have a cup of tea. It might be that you actually sit down for a meal. It might be that you exercise regularly. You have regularly scheduled vacations. Those are very different things. I think when we think about self-care, we tend to think about what we're going to call macro self-care, big things, bubble baths, yoga classes, vacations. Today, we're going to talk about simpler ways, like just a cup of coffee, a cup of tea. So how would you, or how do you hold space for yourself? And continue to just kind of let that question percolate for you, no pun intended. But what gets in your way? What gets in your way of holding space for yourself? Right? Is it your training in graduate school? I mean, the literature talks about this. There is very little conversation, or historically was. I'm hoping this is changing. When I went to graduate school, again, a few years ago in the 80s, nobody talked about it. Carol Goldbaum, who's out there, you were a bit before me. I suspect nobody talked about it. And even now, it's not talked about nearly enough in terms of the necessity. So what gets in your way? You weren't trained that way. Therapists, we take care of people. We don't think we need to be taken care of. We forget that. It's really easy to do. So here are some things that typically can get in the way for people. Need, right? There's so much need out there. People need us. I do some practice consultations for other practice owners. And so I've been in contact with this other practice owner who has a crisis happening in her practice. And, we've been emailing and talking on the phone and trying to navigate this. There's a lot of need out there, whether you're dealing with people in your own life, whether you're dealing with your clients, COVID, all the things that are happening socially and in the world. There's a lot of need out there. So there's a lot of need that can get in the way. People need us. We need to show up. We are taught, and we tend to be, as therapists, self-sacrificing people, right? I get fulfilled by, my internal belief might be, or my experiences, I get fulfilled by helping other people. That's who I am. That's what works for me, right? That's the good news. It might be in my culture, might be part of my culture that I'm supposed to be giving. I might need the money. I was working with a business consultee yesterday who is a therapist, and she has a practice out on the East Coast. And she was talking about how, we were in the middle of our consultation. She said, "Oh, we have 10 minutes left. I'm going to grab some lunch meat really quick." And she walks with her laptop into the kitchen in her office, and she's stuffing some food in her mouth. I'm like, "Please, would you like these 10 minutes? Like, I will even adjust our fee here so that you can have a few minutes just to sit and eat." She has a lot of expenses. She's the only breadwinner in her family. They need the money. There's a lot of pressure there. Expectations. What are our expectations of ourselves? What do we think people's expectations are of us? We are, as Albert Ellis talked about, he talked about irrational thoughts. And we have lots of what he called masturbations. And the masturbations are our expectations of ourselves. I must be an excellent therapist every session. I must be attuned every session. I must have great outcomes every session. I must show up for everyone every time they need me. Must. Those are those expectations. And think for a moment of others. What gets in the way for you? Right? What else gets in your way? Maybe take a note about that, and we will talk about it at the end. But, we know that during COVID in particular, this has been a tough time. And again, the need has been at epic proportions. So, I remember, especially in the beginning of COVID, it felt like it was the end of the world. Like the world had been a particular way and that was ending. And we have wildfires and climate change and social unrest and racial issues that are needing to be addressed desperately. We have all kinds of just horrible things going on. We've had COVID, we've had politics. It's been a mess. And we've been going through it just like everybody else has. Right? This is now us, right? Is it the end of the world as we know it? Well, maybe, because when will we be able to go back and be seeing people live? How often will we be able to do that? Will there be another wave? Will there be another variant? Is it the end of the world as we know it? Right? There used to be competition to get clients. Now everybody seems to be, or many of us are just fully booked. And then people feel horrible because they can't meet the demand. They can't handle all the people that are coming into their practice. So more and more people are either starting a group practice, which is a whole thing. I mean, it's a whole thing. And this is not like anything else. This is not likely to be sustained, that people are going to, there are going to be so many clients with so much need. That's not typically sustainable. But this is stressful too, having to turn people away, and we don't really know where to send them necessarily. And is it really the end of the world as we know it? Is everything changing? Well, no, because things like George Floyd happened, and the racial things that are happening in the world and injustice continues to happen. So it's like, no, the world is really different, but not in ways that we're really happy about. We're dealing, obviously, with all of that stress. This is not a newsflash. You folks know this. I don't have to tell you this. So we don't feel fine. For those of you who don't know that word, it's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. It's an REM song. We're not feeling fine as therapists. Right now, we are not feeling fine. And statistically, we're feeling less fine than we did before, when those 67% of people were already describing burnout. So again, yay for you for being here today. Yay for you for being curious. Or if you're watching this after the fact, yay for you for taking the time to do so for yourself. All fabulous. And I'll tell you, just how many times just even trying to have a meeting has been really complicated. I frequently hear, Margot, you're on mute. Not a fun thing. We are all tired. We're tired. And that's understandable. So having some self-compassion, and if you haven't read any of Kristen Neff's work on self-compassion, please do. It's a great resource, a huge invitation. Please go look at it. We are all tired. We're just tired. So we need to make sure now more than ever, and this has been statistically an issue for a long time, now more than ever, that we are doing these self-care practices. It is essential, and it really seems to show up ethically as a mandate as well. Here is where we're trying to not get to. We don't want to land here where the therapist is walking out of the room saying, I don't think this is doing me any good, right? We don't want to do that physically. I'm sure you would never get up out of your chair and walk out, but boy, you might check out. You might just not be able to dial in, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So I mentioned a bunch of things in the world that could be challenging you. What else challenges you? This is Sisyphus pushing his rock up the hill just for having it, roll back down. What challenges you? What are the biggest challenges for you? Time, money, expectation, something else. What is it that challenges you from doing what you might be able to do to take care of yourself? Here's one that shows up a lot in the literature. Our own relationship to our vulnerability. Who knew, right? You'd think as therapists, we are all about Brené Brown. We're all about vulnerability. We're all about understanding that and helping people get to their own. But we're not so sure we want people to see it in us. And statistically, we don't want our colleagues to see it. And I'll tell you practically as well, we don't want our colleagues to see it. We certainly don't want our clients to see it. And we can become really lousy at letting most people in our lives see it. It's the last thing I want you to see in me, but boy, I'm going right for it in you. I really want to see it in you. And that's very genuine. So our relationship to our own vulnerability is a huge roadblock for therapists, right? Because this gets twisted in us about how we're supposed to show up in the world. our vulnerability becomes a roadblock. It feels like a fault line in us, that there's something wrong if we're feeling vulnerable, if we're showing our vulnerability. Not good. Empathy. Now, how many of you are empaths? Anybody out there an empath? I would call myself an empath, right? What does it mean to be an empath? Oh, I can really put myself in somebody else's shoes. I can feel what they're feeling. My mirror neurons my nervous system is attuning literally through my eyes and through my mouth, through my facial expression, through my bodily posture. I am attuning and adjusting to the other sitting in the room with me. I do that all the time. I am an empath, right? The global therapist, we tend to do this. I certainly think I have the capacity to do that more than sometimes I would like. But empathy is really tricky. So there have been lots of people who have done research and written about empathy. And here's the thing. As mental health professionals, we tend to have more empathy, not surprising, than most people in the world. We tend to have more empathy, more capacity for empathy, more finely attuned nervous systems that can dial into the other. That's a great thing. However, if it's not protected, it can be a real detriment to us and then to our clients. So the other thing is, there's been some great research that's been done about early maladaptive schemas, EMS, early maladaptive schemas. Robin Stern and Diana DeVicia are a couple of people who have looked at this. There are a lot of people who have looked at this. And what they have found is that therapists tend to have a fairly high number of early maladaptive schemas relationally. Just so happens, right? I mean, it's not shocking that many of us have our own histories, our own traumas, right? Life is complicated. We get drawn to the field. We're empaths. And so anybody who has higher rates of empathy, higher rates of early maladaptive schemas are much more likely statistically to develop burnout. That empathy becomes a liability if it isn't held in a way that is grounded, if there aren't boundaries around it. We think of empathy as being our greatest gift as therapists, right? I've done a lot of interviewing during COVID. We've needed to hire on a few more staff. I'm highly empathic is what people tell. I have a lot of empathy. And I think, okay, we've got some things to work. That's great. I'm glad. I mean, you're kind of out of luck. You're in bad shape if you don't have it. But oh my gosh, we need to make sure there's an understanding about how do you take care of that, right? That's an instrument that needs care. You wouldn't take your, really sensitive, telescope and whip it at the ground. You would handle it gently, and we need to do that with our empathy as well. So lots of people have been looking into the impact of stress on therapists, the impact of the field on us as humans. And I just am mentioning the APA Board of Professional Affairs. They eventually became the Advisory Committee on Colleague Assistance. This organization, and I did this presentation for our Illinois Psychological Association membership in May, and not one person had heard of this. And this is this is the advocacy or the advisory committee to assist our colleagues in APA. Nobody had heard of it because nobody's looking for it. It's out there, it's on the website, but we don't think about it. Like, who is available in my professional organization who can help me if I'm having an issue? Because we're ashamed of it. We don't think we should have problems. We don't think we think people will see us as incompetent, versus guess what? When we're able to address these things, we have, according to the ethical standards, even greater competence. And we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, about the ethics coming, the intersection being competency and being able to take care of ourselves. So we're going to dive into that a bit more in a moment. But this organization was developed just for that. And NASW probably has a similar thing. The ACA probably has a similar thing, Marriage and Family Therapist. I suspect everyone has this. So they developed the ACA developed this stress, distress, impairment, and improper behavior trajectory. And it's a downward trajectory. Now, other people have written about, here's the good news. I hate to say bad news only. The good news is people who have done research on this have said, guess what? This sort of cycle that people can get into, and it looks like this. I don't know if that's I don't know what the Guggenheim, I don't know what that is, but, sort of this spiral down is what it is. You go from stress to distress to impairment to improper behavior, down you go. What they have found is that if people have good self-care practices, that reverses and it goes up. So that is the good news. There is an elixir for this. But guess what? Most of us aren't doing it because we think we don't need it or we shouldn't, or there's something wrong with us if we do, and we certainly don't want to tell anybody about it. So stress, what is stress? We talk about stress mess. I mean, it's a word that doesn't even have impact anymore. Here's the deal. Stress is an engineering term. We co-opted it, but it's an engineering term that means it's the pressure put on a structure. And as long as there is balance in terms of the pressure that's placed, chances are good whatever the structure is will not collapse. But stress happens and stress fractures happen when too much weight is put and there's not enough support. And that's really what stress is, right? So stress is the pressure that is exerted, the force that's exerted on a structure, the force that's exerted on us. What happens is we then can move into a state of distress. So we aren't feeling stress, we're feeling distress. We are feeling the effect of that stress over a period of time. And this is cumulative, right? Just like what happens in our nervous system. What happens in our nervous system is cumulative. Before you end up with a stress-related disorder, your nervous system has been dysregulated for a long time. That's a conversation for a different day, but that's what distress is. Distress is you've had stress for a long time and you're really starting to be impacted in a significant way. It's not a bad day. It's like the cumulative effect. And then we get into impairment. And this is actually where people start to get harmed. You get harmed. And what's most distressing to me and to you, I would imagine, is your clients get harmed. Now, what does that mean? They're not getting particularly good care. And sometimes they're getting downright crummy care, right? If you are burnt to a crisp, if I'm burnt to a crisp and I'm not really looking forward to going to work, I don't really want to show up. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I just wish everybody would cancel today and, money be damned or whatever. And whatever it is we're thinking and feeling, people can feel that even on a screen. And my clients, I don't know about you, but my clients, we've started talking about how they can feel me through the screen and what makes that happen for them. So it can happen even on the computer, folks. We think we can hide a little bit better, whether we're trying to or not. But that impairment is really distressing. It's where we are already dialed out. We're already into burnout. We're already not fully showing up for our clients. And then that's what leads to improper behavior. Now, what is that? That's subjective, isn't it? Right? So improper behavior could be, we think of the huge things like dual relationships, boundary failures, substance abuse, right? It also can be missing appointments and skipping and just canceling and things that just aren't good for ourselves or for care. So this is the predictable outcome. And we don't tend to see it until it's in the rearview mirror. Let me repeat that again. We are not even aware of this statistically, typically, until it's in the rearview mirror. We might know we're off. We might know we're not feeling okay, but we aren't aware of the impact on the people around us until it's in the rearview mirror, meaning like it's been happening for a while and we're looking at the mirror saying, oh, that's where I've been. That doesn't seem good. So if you think about it, stress, you can, if you're in the green here, stress, you can be excelling, doing really well. Then you might move into thriving. You're doing well still. Over time, more stress, you're just kind of into surviving. When you're in impairment, now you're struggling. And when you're improper behavior, you are in crisis. It is a crisis, but we're numbed out typically when we're there and we don't even see it. We're tired. We don't even see it. So this is kind of a big deal. Compassion fatigue, huge. This is something that happens, and it is just what it sounds like. Here are the signs: physical anxiety, sense of hopelessness, decreased ability to empathize, right? Because we've done too much. Our empathy is sprained. Irritability and impatience, right? We're snapping at people more, or perhaps not, but we're feeling it inside. We're not as productive. The job doesn't feel as good. It kind of sucks to go to work. Not sleeping as well, not as much pleasure. You just want to maybe be alone. Self-doubt. Lots of self-doubt comes with burnout and compassion fatigue. I'm not very good at this anyway. I don't really know what I'm doing. You've been doing it for 25 years. Yeah, but other people are much better than I am because we have all of our masturbations, right? About how I should be doing fabulously every time. And as we know, every session isn't great for a number of reasons, many of which may have nothing to do with whether or not we are having compassion fatigue. It's what the client brings in too, or they're having a bad day, or, it happens. But again, it's that sense of self-doubt and reduced self-esteem. Huge problem. And burnout, right? I mean, have you ever felt this way? I love this little graphic. Yep. That's what it feels like. And especially now that we're doing all of this on a screen. So according to Yang and Hayes, this is a psychological syndrome that's characterized by emotional exhaustion. And folks, in the literature over and over and over again, the words that are put to burnout are emotional exhaustion, emotional exhaustion, emotional exhaustion. If you find yourself being emotionally exhausted, that's okay. That's understandable, but it's a red flag. It means that your attention is needed here. Depersonalization, reduced sense of personal accomplishment. And this is true for all professions, for people across the board. It affects, for psychotherapists, it's happening more often than it does to the average bearer, the average worker. I mean, we could look at physicians and ER docs, and we're talking kind of globally and the ways that it affects psychotherapists. Burnout affects psychotherapists' general well-being, and it affects our ability to be really good therapists. So the thing we are putting ourselves out there and eating turkey standing up against the sink instead of taking a break and showing up for our clients, that very thing ends up causing us to not be as effective as we want to be. Who wants that to be the case? I mean, of course, we don't, right? Warning signs of burnout, folks. Poor therapists, violating boundaries, self-medicating. We've covered these, wishing people wouldn't show up. It's difficult to focus. I mean, all of us are, it's normal. Our brains every 90 seconds or so are going to wander off anyway, and we'll bring it back pretty quickly. But then we'll be wandering for a while and think, oh my gosh, what is this person talking about? Not a good thing. I will tell you, I mean, this is so embarrassing, but since I'm talking about vulnerability here, during my second bout of burnout, I was working with a client who was very disconnected from herself. I saw her after lunch. It was hard to stay engaged with her. She was so emotionally just not there. It was like a head sitting on a block, just the mouth going. And, she was complicated, just very dissociated, very disconnected. And at one point, I ended up actually nodding off. How horrifying is that? Sitting in my chair. And at one point, I felt and my head snapped up and I said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And she looked at me startled and said, why? And I said, I think I nodded off a little bit. She said, oh, I didn't notice. And she went right back. I mean, if I was going to nod up with anybody, thank goodness it was her. Her system didn't even pick up on it. I mean, my head went down and snapped back. You know how that goes. That's how tired I was. It wasn't that I wasn't sleeping well, only I was emotionally exhausted. So talk about having a hard time focusing, boredom, fatigue, missing appointments, all that kind of stuff. Those are just things to watch out for. So now let's dive into the ethics, because that's really part of what, if we're having a hard time finding a reason to do this for ourselves or for our clients even, we tend to be motivated for the most part by ethics, right? I mean, everybody on our staff, I think we have a very ethical team. I think most therapists are very ethical people. Not everybody, obviously. There's people who will cut corners and bill for things they didn't do and yada, 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 not claim every penny, whatever. But let's talk about the ethics and what the ethics say about self-care. Because again, they don't address self-care directly. That's not a thing. But we're going to talk about how it gets woven into competency. And competency is an ethical imperative. So you can read this. This is the American Counseling Association, right? You're looking for signs of impairment in your own mental and emotional state. Refrain from offering services when you're impaired. It's right there. You are not to do this if you are impaired. You are not in a competent state if you are impaired. And competence isn't just, I will practice within the bounds of my license. That's not all that competence is. This is competence as well. And that we will self-monitor and take ourselves out when we need to. Well, guess what? That's really tough because, again, that rearview mirror thing, right? We aren't seeing it as it's happening. The other imperative, and I didn't include this, is that all of the ethics codes say, look, if you see an impaired colleague, you will do something. You will act in some way because they might not be able to see it yet. It's not quite in their rearview mirror yet. So we have an ethical responsibility to monitor ourselves and to show up for our colleagues. Not everybody wants to hear it. I've had this conversation with therapists when I thought they were seeing too many clients. They were seeming burned out. They were seeming disengaged. And I have gotten, right, because they're also, right, when we're in this, we're also irritable and we tend to be defensive because of our masturbations. But especially as a supervisor, these are imperative conversations to have. And as a good colleague, we just need to be talking about these things. NASW Code of Ethics, same thing. Impairment. Social workers won't let their own personal problems, any of these things, interfere with their professional judgment. Rearview mirror, colleagues need to be helping out. This is why working in a group of colleagues, either working in a group practice or having colleagues that you are connected to, is so important, because I want somebody to say to me, Margot, you are not okay. You don't seem okay with, you seem like something is off. You seem exhausted. You seem tired. You seem out of it. You're forgetting ththings. Thank you. I need that. I need to not let my masturbations get in my way. Also, it goes on to talk about how we will take steps, again, in the NASW Code of Ethics. If somebody else is having this problem, you're going to point it out to them, but you're going to get consultation. You're going to do something immediately. Should immediately seek consultation and take appropriate action. Very, very important. All the codes of ethics talk about this. In the APA Code of Ethics, which is the one that I'm most familiar with, it's beneficence and non-malfeasance. Leave it to the psychologist to have to use that kind of language. But we are striving to be as aware as possible of the effects of our own physical and mental health on our ability to work and with those, and the effect on the people we work with. Competence, maintaining competence. Psychologists undertake ongoing efforts to develop and maintain their competence. Everybody's code of ethics says that. And the personal problems and conflicts, same thing we talked about with the other codes of ethics. We're going to be on them. We're going to not work if we are struggling. Hopefully, we're going to get consultation. We're going to terminate the work if we need to. We're going to help out our colleagues if we need to. Everybody's code of ethics says the same thing. It doesn't say you will enact self-care. It just says this is what you're going to do if you are not doing well. So how do we avoid getting here, given all that we've just talked about? It's through self-care. It's through doing things on a regular basis that feed our souls. That's the only way. So we are also supposed to avoid harm. And what a horrible thought that we could be harming the people that we're working with if we are not taking care of ourselves. Nobody wants that. Here's the other thing. If you're newer in the field, yay for you, because the research says, guess what? It's much easier to manage these issues that we've just talked about, these impacts that we've just talked about, from a preventative perspective. It's from a prophylactic perspective. I am going to prevent this self-harm and then harm to others. I am going to prevent it versus, oh my gosh, now I'm here and I have to climb my way out. It is very hard to do. It can be done. I've done it. I've done it twice. trying not, hopefully never again. But ultimately, if you do it prophylactically, you are going to have much better outcomes with your clients, much better results for yourself. Relationships will be better all the way around. You have to train your system. Now, I don't expect you to be able to read this funky grid. This is actually a marathon training schedule. And I think of being a therapist like training for a marathon, right? I need to be doing things week over week, day by day, making sure that I am prepared for the race because it's a long one. I need to be able to do 26.2 miles. Some of us, it's 26.2 years. I'm on 33 years at this point. We have a long, long career. So training your system by doing these things regularly. And like anything else, it does take training for our systems to be able to benefit, right? How many times have you said to a client, try this thing, try a breathing exercise? And I have somebody come back and say, I tried your stupid breathing exercise. It didn't work. Often people say, well, no, it doesn't seem like it's for me, but I tried your stupid breathing exercise. Okay. So, all right, now what? So breathing exercises, as we know, you're not going to get a whole lot of benefit from the first time. You go to a gym once, you're not down a size in your closet. I mean, right? All of these things take time for your nervous system, for your brain, for your body to be able to feast off of them, but you will still get benefit. So now what? We're going to go quickly through, not because I want to race through it, but because I want to just give you some ideas, some of the macro and micro self-care. When you think of self-care, what are you thinking of? Vacations, right? You're out of office, you're on the beach, macro self-care. Gym membership, macro self-care, even having to draw a bath and lay in the bath for half an hour, going to a yoga class, even if it's online, doing a meditation class. You need to have a chunk of time where you could do these things. And these are all fabulous. But you know what? We're the people standing at the sink eating, turkey out of a package. So I'm thinking we need more of what are called micro self-care options. So here are some. I'm just going to zip through a few. I always wash my hands between clients. Zip over to the bathroom. I'm always over there. I wash my hands and I'm breathing and I'm getting off what just was there before. 2 seconds worth of work. Have a little bottle of essential oils in your office. Some lavender if you need to calm down. Some lemon if you need a pick-me-up because maybe you feel exhausted and or you have been kind of climbing the nervous system ladder up with your client and you need something to bring you down. A little bit of essential oils, wave it under your nose. Your nervous system will love it. Have on soundscapes that you turn on between clients. Don't do back-to-back sessions if you can help it. And I mean like even 5 to 10 minutes in between to do a few of these things. Sketch, have a coloring book, scribble. I have 3 beautiful windows in my office, and even here at home, I have a bank of windows I'm looking out right now. There's more windows off to this direction. I'm watching the trees. I have one tree that's already changing colors. Those are some things that can be very soothing. These are all things that will get your nervous system more regulated. It will get you out of that heightened state of stress or out of that exhausted state and bring you up to that really kind of normal nervous system state that we want to be in, because we are in social engagement only when we are here. So these are all nervous system adjustments. That's what we're trying to do. You can have some music on your phone. I have been known on many occasions to do a little jig, a little dance in my office between clients, especially if I'm kind of tired. I'm going to get up and move a little bit. I might do a little boogie down the hall. You can have a tension ball that you're holding on to. These are all things that take a few seconds, right? Your nervous system can benefit from 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes of intervention. It doesn't have to be that you're on a beach, right? I have a TheraCane, which is like a curved cane that I can put behind my back and just press on some pressure points. That can help wake up my nervous system. You can hold on to, if you've had a rough session, you can hold on to a meaningful object, right? Those are all things that you can do very quickly, very easily. Sometimes I start my day not even sometimes anymore. I start my day this way before I even get out of bed. I prepare myself for some self-care. I use the Calm app, which there's lots of apps on your phone. You can download an app. do a quick one, 5 minutes of a breathing exercise, do some stretches in the bed, do some twists, create an intention for the day and breathe into it. 5 minutes. I am done with my self-care before I get out of bed routine within 5 minutes. I am all about easy and efficient. I might want to start my day as I'm driving to work or as I'm coming up to the office here at home, thinking about what is my purpose, right? We forget because we're just in the grind. What is my purpose? My purpose might be, I want to be here always to do my best work. I do this work because, fill in the blank. Again, just these are little ways to get your nervous system, your brain, your mind, your body in the right space. Eileen, you might be here, Eileen, I don't know, but Eileen, who is our intake coordinator, has a meeting with her team every morning, and they're talking about things that are left over from the day before and things that they need to address today. And she always starts the day by saying, let's go help people today. And I have taken that. And when I sit down in my chair, I say, okay, I'm going to go help people today. So we are going to actually wrap up in a moment so that we can start our Q&A portion, and you have your poll that you need to do. I'm going to just cover a couple of more of these. During your workday, as I said, please be sure to make sure you schedule yourself some meal times. That is super important. Keep a fun beverage handy. Those are things, and a fun beverage, meaning you might have, a particular kind of fizzy drink that you really love. Something that's just a moment that feels like a little treat for you. After difficult sessions, do a loving kindness meditation for yourself. We do it for other people. Do it for yourself. Loving kindness meditation for yourself. Schedule in breaks. Anything like that. I have bubbles in my office too. Sometimes I like to blow bubbles because breathing, I get a little tired of doing the same thing over and over again. And that can be really good for my nervous system. If you're feeling tired, you can do a panting sort of breath. That'll energize you if you're feeling that emotional exhaustion. So all of these things, I just wanted to toss out some ideas of things that you can do that are just really brief and work them into your day. Get some ideas for yourself. What would you like to do? If any of you need some suggestions, here is a book. We will put this in our resources. It's Simple Self-Care for Therapists. This is written by Ashley Davis Bush. You can get it on Amazon. It's just chock full. It's a book all of little self-care, micro self-care strategies. So again, we are doing this for ourselves so that we can be the best therapist that we can be, so that we can be good for ourselves and available for ourselves, so that we can have a long and engaged career, so we can have good relationships in our lives. Our ethics code actually says it's important for us to do. All right, so we have covered, this would be an example of macro self-care. We've covered micro self-care. Feel free, if your building will let you, light some candles. Let me know. What are you thinking? Questions, comments, thoughts? And if you don't have a question, maybe tell us, how do you take care of yourself? What are some things that you do? I rattled off a whole bunch of things. What are some things that you do? Or what gets in the way? If you have a little meditation book that you can open, that's fabulous. Oh my gosh. Yeah, someone anonymously said, sleep hygiene is so important. I make sure to get a full 8 hours on days when I see clients. For sure. That is imperative. And if you're not familiar with sleep hygiene, I think there's lots of literature out there about how to do that. But I think essentially what we're talking about is trying to go to bed, making sure you turn off your screens, putting the phone away, having a nightly routine, trying to do it at the same time every night. A lot of us who are middle-aged struggle with sleep because I typically wake up at 3 a.m. It might be a hot flash. It could be whatever. We wake up and then we're awake for a couple hours. So making sure that we go to bed a little earlier so that we can compensate for that. Sleep imperative. So thank you for that. Yeah, that's really important. All right. So that is all we have time for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Chris, final words about housekeeping before we go. And my information is on the screen. If you have any questions, want to follow up with me in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out. So thank you for joining us. Chris, final housekeeping.
Thank you all. And in regards to your CEUs, if you go into this course in the CEU online school, you have to complete the end of session test and the evaluation, and then your CEU is there for you to see right then, and you can download it and use it as you need to.
All right, everyone, have a wonderful weekend. Go take care of yourselves. It's good for everybody. Be well.